All right, it is now 6:34. We are going to ask that Ms. Leduc, if you could give us a roll call.
Okay, thank you, sir. Sorry. All right, roll call. Mr. DeCorda? Here. Mr. Fox? Here. Mr. Williams?
Here.
Mr. Kendrick?
Here.
Mr. Maffett?
Here.
Ms. Flatley? Mr. Myers did let us know he was going to be absent. Mr. Nicely?
Here.
And Mr. Palavoda?
Here.
All right, thank you. We have a quorum.
All right. Let it be recorded that we have established a quorum. May we please stand for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We bow our heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for bringing us together in this place and providing us an environment where we can focus on the business of our county. We ask for your guidance in shaping our hearts and minds to make decisions that serve for the best interests of our citizens. As we conclude and depart from this gathering, we humbly ask for your grace and mercy and grant us safe and mercy in our travels from this place. These are the blessings we pray. Amen. All right, first on the agenda, we have approval of the minutes. I ask that each member take a look. All right. Okay. Are there any corrections?
I make a motion, we approve the minutes from April 8th, 2025.
Second.
Motions has been made and seconded. All in favor, show of hands and aye. Aye. Are there any abstentions? Mr. Fox has abstained. And minutes have been passed as approved. Okay. Next is our citizens' public comment period. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person to afford everyone an opportunity to speak. If comments relate to a specific public hearing item, please offer them at that time of the public hearing. Let's see, I do. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Okay. First on the list is Mr. James Shaw.
This would relate to PC 05, 25, 06, 25, and 07, 25. Is that appropriate this time?
Yes, we do have a public hearing for that, so no, sir, if you can wait until that. Okay.
Oh, Mr. Chair, the only public hearing tonight is for ordinance amendment OA-01-25, so it would be appropriate if he spoke.
Very well, thank you. I apologize, Mr. Shaw. I apologize.
That's why I asked, because I knew it was kind of, Okay. James Shaw, James Monroe District, columnist for the Northern Next Sentinel, citizen journalist, kgmedia.top. Speaking both in my capacity as EDA member and as King George taxpayer. It is not a perfect world, as much as we might wish and hope it would be. No matter how you vote this evening, someone is going to feel infringed upon. As a member of the EDA, I and the rest of the Board of Supervisor appointed members are on the lookout for businesses and developers like these that have minimal impact on the lean infrastructure of our rural county. With a statistical 75% of the county's $136 million revenue stream coming from residential property taxes, which don't pay their way, We need other sources to make up the difference. The D word, landfill, has served us well for a number of years, but in a decade or so, that resource will end and Mount Trashmore will remain. No more noisy methane reprocessors. The EDA put a deal together before my time, around 2017, to put a bunch of solar panels in and around the Birchwood power plant. In looking at the revenue, that would have been a low revenue and tax project when compared to a data center, which is now slated for that property. Our county has 3 sites appropriate for data centers, 800 some odd acres, 300 some odd acres, this project, and 500 some odd acres, Dahlgren West. That's enough for our 179 square miles as guided by our comprehensive plan. I recommend passage of those 3 previous mentioned overtures because I have seen these folks work hard to meet reasonable expectations and come up with facts and creative solutions. The noise issue will be a continual challenge. The cooling technology continues to advance with low noise blade designs, various liquid cooling techniques, and some stuff still in R&D that I can't talk about because of non-disclosure. We can do this, and we can do it with a forward-looking view that keeps taxes low and the majority of the county rural and agricultural. May God bless the King George Renaissance.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Next on the list, we have Mr. William Taylor.
I'd just like to say what Mr. Shaw said is absolutely correct. We need the revenue.
I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, if you could state your name and your
William
address.
Taylor,
Yes, sir. And your address?
10359 Ridgeway Drive, King
Very
George.
well. Thank you, sir.
I'd just like to state Mr. Shaw is exactly correct. We need the revenue. It's low impact. I think it's a great idea. That's all I have to say.
Very well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
All right. I have no others on the list. Is there anyone else who wish to come up and speak at this time? All right. Seeing that there are none, public hearing session is now closed. Okay. Board, do we have any discussion on what we've just heard? All right.
At this time.
All right. Seeing that there are none, we're going to move on to our next item, which is our Community Planning Liaisons Officer of Naval Support Facility South Potomac, Dahlgren, Mr. Adam Lynch. Mr. Lynch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So missed the last meeting. I apologize for that, but plenty of material for this month. So recently, the base was a participant in George Washington Regional Commission's Regional Economic Development Strategy meetings, which is going to be an 8-month-long consultant-led project that is going to deliver recommendations to the George Washington Regional Commission for regional economic development strategies. Obviously, the military influence in the Fredericksburg and King George area is significant. So questions came up about what is the economic development and workforce outlook for the Navy, especially here related to Dahlgren. And I can report some of the information that we provided for the contractors and for the GWRC staff. Our outlook is in the short term, the base was affected by the recent round of deferred resignation and early retirement opportunities. This was a voluntary separation policy that was announced by the Defense Department. We were affected by that here at Dahlgren, lost somewhere in the hundreds of employees. That's the best information I can give you, affecting specifically the civilian workforce, which represents about 60 to 65% of the folks that are on base at Dahlgren. And so, what does that mean here locally? Certainly, one thing we're anticipating is a continued need for the products and the services that the Navy provides here at Dahlgren. Combine that with a reduction and we think a cooling in federal civilian employee hiring. What that leads me and others to believe is that there's going to be a continued and an increase in reliance on contractors to perform a lot of the work that the Defense Department does and requires as we continue to see activity in foreign theaters. So Here in King George, that provides potentially an opportunity for those contractors to be located and do their activity here in the county. Hard to tell, and read where this goes in the future, but certainly the availability of proper facilities, things like office space and flex space, is a continued interest in the continued interest of the Navy and our industry partners, as well as looking at other more comprehensive factors, including workforce availability and infrastructure. So both of those and informs our outlook on the future economic outlook for the base. And then finally, the Navy continues to consider participation in the REPI program, which is the Readiness and Environmental Protection Integration Program. That is a partnership and a funding program that the Navy and the DoD administers that provides cost share money for private land conservation in mission critical areas. So give you an example, the Navy makes available funding for open space conservation in areas that are affected by noise here in the King George and Westmoreland County area on the Northern Neck. Very, very happy to see that we've had some really good candidates for land conservation in those mission impacted areas to help incompatible development away from those noisy and potentially, in some cases, safety impacted areas of the counties. So that is my report. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for Mr. Lynch?
I have two quick questions. Actually, a question and a request. Do you know if the reductions that happened with the DRP, is there going to be a permanent reduction in the allowed staffing at Dahlgren, or is this a temporary reduction that will eventually it will grow back up over the next few years with rehiring? Do you have any idea on that at this time?
It's a very good question. I can't anticipate really what things are going to look like in the future, but I can tell you that the DoD is currently still under a hiring freeze for any positions that are not authorized in writing by the Department of Defense leadership. So that puts a cap on that hiring in the short term. Can't tell you what it's going to look like in the long term, though.
Certainly understand. I've been there associated with the base for over 45 years, so I've been through multiple hiring freezes. I was just curious exactly how this is playing out currently. So there is a hiring freeze until that gets lifted at whoever's discretion. My second question is actually a request. Could you give us a general idea of the percentage of the people that work at Dahlgren that actually live in King George County? I've always wondered that. I don't know if you all have the statistics. I don't expect you to give me something off the top of your head.
Yes,
But
actually,
it'd be very interesting for us to know if there's X number of employees, how many of them actually live in the county?
yes, we actually do have that information, and that was some part of the materials that we provided for the contractor, for GWRC's contractor. In the neighborhood of 32% of base personnel live in King George County as of 2021.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions?
The joint land use survey process, would you recommend postponing that until after the George Washington Regional Commission
So
meets, or?
my answer for that is, a JLUS, a joint land use study, can be undertaken. It does not necessarily relate at all to an economic development study. Those can happen concurrently. However, that's a process that may not be compatible with the comprehensive planning process. Having those two things happen concurrently may be a challenge and not something we would necessarily suggest.
Great. And I want to say the oysters are doing great. Good growth over the winter in my waters. And so now we know.
Very glad to hear it.
All right. Are there any others? All right. Mr. Lynch, thank you so much. Thank you. All right, next is old business, which is an action resolution on PC-04-25 application Z-2024-00239, TWR Marine rezoning, and which was deferred from April 8th of 2025.
Yes, sir. I'm just going to give a brief update.
Yes, ma'am.
This rezoning application was before y'all at your meeting last month, and public hearing was held. And after discussion, the applicant agreed to the deferral of action in order to come back to you all with a proposed voluntary proffer statement, which can be found in your packet. Just as a reminder, and for the public listening and watching tonight, the application was to rezone approximately 2.39 acres of land from R1 to C2, general commercial. The subject property is located at 4509 James Madison Parkway, just west of the intersection with Potomac Drive. There's a revised PC resolution as well as some draft motions in your packet. And Mr. Whitaker is here tonight if you have any questions for him. And you could invite him up to speak if you wish.
Okay. I'm gonna give you the invite, but yeah, come on up, sir, if you wish, only if you wish. Yeah.
Thank you, Taylor Whitaker. Thanks for having me again tonight.
Sure.
As Kelly mentioned, I don't really have much more to offer, but thank you again for having me tonight. I appreciate y'all's time and your consideration in helping me drive this forward in the way that kind of makes everybody happy and benefits the community. That being said, I'm here to entertain any questions you have. That's all.
Right.
But thank you.
Anyone have any questions for him? No? I have a general question. With this rain, when will this fishing get better?
My son's out right now. I'll give you a report as soon as he's back.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Okay, next is the public hearing. Oh, sorry.
To take action if you would.
Take action on this. Can I get a motion? Well, first, let me open the floor for.
Mr. Chairman, I was reading, so I'm not sure if Kelly said this, but the proffer statement that they submitted, all of those things that you see on that are uses that they have proffered away, which some of the uses were concerning to folks. So they have voluntarily said, we can't do this here.
I'm ready to make a motion to approve if there's no other discussion.
Could I make a comment?
Sure.
first?
Yes, sir.
I'm still just philosophically opposed to rezoning land so far in advance of any actual activity going on it. I don't think that's a smart move on our part. Things change over time, and so all due respect to the applicant, I have no problem with his proposed use, at least for the boat sales and servicing portion of it. But I just think waiting a year or 2 years until he can acquire the necessary funding to proceed with this is not a good move on our part. And I realize that he's proffered some things that go along with the approval, but I still just don't believe philosophically it's a good thing to do. Secondly, I'd be a lot more inclined to agree with the proffer and this rezoning if it didn't have that 4-unit rental property on it, because that makes it not just a boat sales, which everybody seems to be concentrating on, but a commercial property that is open to anybody who wants to come in and occupy it and perform whatever business they have. I appreciate that he's hit the high list of things that we typically talk about not wanting in some of our areas, but to me it just seems too open. So I'm still not in favor of rezoning at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Kendrick, for your comments. Does anyone else requesting the floor? Ms. Flattery.
So I appreciate your concern, and I know sometimes we've gotten caught opening the door and not knowing what's going to come through. However, especially with a small business owner, there's barriers to entry. And, one of those is he may not be able to make this happen any other way. And of all the businesses, I think we want to support, it's locals and veterans. And I think that we have to rely on our ordinances and trust that, you know, they're going to serve us well.
All right. Anyone else requesting the floor?
Yeah, I had a quick comment, just,
Sean, and then we'll go with you, sir.
the comment is it's surrounded by commercial property. Nobody's going to build a house there, and it's pretty much across the street from Walmart. So I think rezoning this property is the highest and best use for this. Nobody's going to build a house on it. It had a trailer on it that's been abandoned. Next door is an abandoned house, and immediately next door is commercial property.
Thank you, sir. You have the floor, sir.
I respect Mr. Kendrick's point of view and his caution, but I agree with Stan and Ms. Sean and Ms. Flatley that it's quite common for someone to pull permits, get a rezoning, and then go look for financing. This is not unusual. This is actually more typical than not. That if we condition, that we require available financing be disclosed prior to a decision like this, that's standard that we need to apply broadly. And I agree with Ms. Flatley, especially on the barriers to entry to small businesses and frankly, creation of additional space for small businesses in a commercially zoned area, I don't see as a downside. I am prepared to support this application.
All right. We've heard both pros. Mr. Fox, you have the floor.
Maybe just have a quick question. In deference to some of your, I guess, your fairness argument a little bit, Mr. Kendrick, if the property were rezoned today, when would there be a tax assessment done on the property to know what the new taxes would be on it? Would that also be, a year or two out in the future, or would that be relatively soon? Because if that were relatively soon, then maybe that negates some of that fairness argument that I think you're rightly making to some degree. Do we know when that would occur? When would if the property were rezoned now, when would the next assessment be done on the tax value and so on?
I can speak a little bit to the process. So once the decision would come to the Board of Supervisors, they would have to pass an ordinance to rezone the property, which would have to go through the process of getting recorded and then updated by GIS and Commissioner of Revenue. I don't know if it would immediately change the land use classification. Mr. Stewart might know.
But it's not just has to wait for the 5-year regularized process, or could it be done on a bespoke basis?
The commissioner would assign a new value to it based upon the comps, as I understand it, in the county, and it would then be reassessed at the next reassessment, whenever that is. It's not always 5 years. You actually can reassess now every 2 or 3 years, I think. I know there was a bill that passed regarding that.
Kurt, just for my information, if you guys know, is there a different taxes based on the zoning for the land? Because the businesses won't be there for a while. So.
It doesn't matter. Once it's commercial, it's taxed differently.
Well, it's taxed differently, so.
And then sometimes even depending upon how it's classified, there are rollback taxes that have to be paid if there's land use on it or something like that.
So, I mean, it seemed to me logically that if it changed its zoning, the next tax bill should reflect the current zoning and it would be taxed at that level. There's no assessment needed. It's strictly, the land.
As I understand it, the commissioner will assign a new value based upon comparables to reflect its commercial zoning. But he was asking about reassessments. The county reassesses every 3 to 5 years. And it won't be reassessed until they actually have a reassessment and hire an outside organization to do that.
I interpreted Mr. Fox's comments about when would the tax revenue change. And it would change at the next tax year is my guess, but Is that incorrect or?
Once it gets the new classification, it will be taxed as such.
All right. We've heard both pros and cons for our support of and against. Are we ready to take a motion? Or can I get a motion?
I move to adopt resolution number PC 04-25 to forward application Z-2024-00239 to the King George County Board of Supervisors with a favorable recommendation.
A second?
Motion's been made.
And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Palavoto, did that recommendation include the voluntary proffer submitted by the applicant?
I would amend the motion to include the voluntary proffers. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, the motion's been made and seconded. Ms. Leduc, if you can.
Yes, I'll do the roll. Mr. DeCorda? Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Mr. Palavoto?
Aye.
Mr. Kendrick? Mr. Maffett?
Aye.
Ms. Flatley?
Aye.
Mr. Nicely?
Aye.
And Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Motion carries with a recommendation of approval. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next is new business, which is, I'm sorry, public hearing on resolution PC-08-25 ordinance amendment OA-01-25. Okay. So during your comments, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes per person so that everyone is afforded an opportunity to speak. And again, this is on ordinance amendments OA-01-25. Sir, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman
Good evening.
and Board Planning Commission members. I'm going to try my best to be very short before you tonight. The Board of Supervisors on April 1st meeting initiated a tax amendment. They wanted to they wanted to change the King County Code and industrial district regulations. I believe this was to enhance the economic development and industrial district for building height. It was directed to staff to prepare a text amendment for the consideration of the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. The Planning Commission shall hold at least one public meeting and forward a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. In doing this, they could put up section 4.7 industrial district regulations. I think you also have this on your packet too. This is where you have all the regulations for everything that's in the I district. What's going on is that if you look at the bottom, there's a footnote at the bottom that says buildings may be erected to a height of 50 feet, provided they are required front, side, and rear setbacks and minimum standards shall be increased 1 foot for each foot and heights over 35. So what we did was we want to add another footnote saying buildings may be erected to a height greater than 50 feet upon the issuance of a special exemption for the Board of Supervisors. This way, in an industrial district, it doesn't matter who comes in, but you will have the opportunity to see if that's warranted or not. And it gives everybody opportunity. Right now, the ordinance has nothing in it. So if somebody was looking to locate here and they didn't have the building height, they might pass us by because they could not do it. This gives you the opportunity to have something in your tool belt to be able to say, yes, we can do this, and this is the way you would go about doing this. And I think this also would help the economic development in this county. And this is only in industrial, no other districts, just industrial. Do you have any other questions for me, or can I clarify something?
Sure, you have the floor, sir.
Yeah, I have one quick question. In the original footnote, it talks about that the setback should be increased 1 foot for each foot over the 35.
Yes, sir.
Is that going to carry with this additional
Yes, sir.
extension?
Nothing's changed. Yes, sir.
Okay, but the one only addresses you can go to 50. I didn't know if we needed to put the additional language in this. If someone
Actually-
goes to 200 feet and they get the board to agree to it,
Mr.
they have to
Nicely?
continue to.
With a special exception, you can always have conditions. And so that's sort of pro forma, that footnote number 1. When you go to the process of a special exception, you can establish conditions that could be beyond that, 1 foot for every foot of height, or increased screening, or there are a number of things you can do. You get the ability to.
Would it be required to meet this ordinance that they increase it by 1 foot with the two separate?
Only if you all impose those conditions. So they could do it without anything, which is unlikely, but this gives the planning commission or the county staff, the zoning administrator, the ability to say, well, if you want to go to 80 feet, we think you should do this. We think the setback should be this much. We think your screening material should now have to be mature cypress trees or whatever it is. It allows you the flexibility to actually set those conditions to accommodate their request and to
So it would be
mitigate what they're doing.
Sorry, sir. Is that something that we would have to add then in the special exception, or would it be required because it's in the ordinance that they at least as a minimum have to do the 1 foot additional for every foot over 35?
The language that's in there under footnote 2 is sufficient because you always have the ability to add conditions when you are hearing a special exception.
Got it.
If you added language to it, you actually would be limiting yourself, limiting your
At
ability.
least a foot, but you're saying at this point does not necessarily apply, but it's something that could come in as part of the special exception process.
Correct.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, sir, you have the floor.
I think there's something to the 50 feet with the fire department being able to put out a fire or maintain our property at that height. Do we have new capability that allows us to go higher than 50 feet with the fire department, or does anybody know what their capabilities are?
My understanding.
I know that there have been discussions between certain applicants and the chief where, based upon certain proffers, the chief would be able to get to about 80. Is that right? 80, 85 feet?
Not with the current truck he has.
But with proffers that are being offered, they are going to have new equipment. I don't even know if they can get to 50 feet right now, but.
I know he said they cannot get to 65.
All right, Matt has information. You want to use my mic?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I understood the question was with fire suppression and building height. So this has been discussed. We've had some discussions and not speaking for Chief Moody, but it was my understanding in our conversations, a 55-foot building or an 85-foot building are really one and the same. There comes a point in time where if you have a ladder truck, a lot of it has to depend on how far that truck is away from the building itself. And again, this comes to a certain point where you look at the city of Richmond. City of Richmond doesn't have fire suppression equipment that can serve all those buildings, yet they continually approve them. Why is that? That is not a deciding factor on building height of whether or not you can get a ladder truck up there. If that's the case, we wouldn't see what we'd see across America.
That makes sense.
So, think of it that way, but, my general understanding is 55, 85, it's really one and the same from a fire suppression standpoint with a ladder truck.
I'm pretty sure that when you exceed the ability to rescue somebody, then you require specific and very specialized fire suppression systems for the building.
That's right. There are foam systems. It depends on what's inside, what sort of combustibles are inside. Take for instance, a distribution center. Sometimes you're going to have your flammables in a certain area, and there are special sorts of foam suppression systems. And think about some of these structures. You may have a data center or a warehouse that comes in at 90 foot. You're not going to have people on the roof typically all the time. Typically in a distribution center, everybody's on the floor with racks. So your occupancy is on level 1. So, getting up on the roof, that's generally not the first plan of attack for a fire department, because there should not be any people up on the roof of a 90 foot warehouse.
Yeah, I don't think the issue is getting on the
Thank you.
roof like fire. The issue is allowing the rescue of individuals inside the building. These buildings are going to be very tall. Let's talk about data centers for a second. Those kind of buildings, which is the only thing we're talking about in the current agenda.
Well, these are for all industrial uses.
And they're going to have people on those floors. I don't have an objection to this. I just don't want my fellow commissioners to be misled. It's about rescuing people. Currently, they only have a truck that can get to basically the window height of a 2-story building. That's the reason we don't have 3-story, residential buildings. Now, if somebody were to proffer a truck, that's great. We go to this, and I don't have any problems with that philosophically. The only concern I have, and maybe it's not worth it, but, once somebody does proffer to purchase a ladder truck or provide funds for the purchase of a ladder truck, it's still going to take 1.5 to 2 years before
Three.
last long time, before they can actually have possession of that. So the only concern here is that, we recognize that.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Chairman, just to Mr. Kendrick, that's largely why we came up with a special exception process, because you all, if you decided to approve a request to go to 80 or 90 or whatever it is, there could be a condition that says you must adequately prepare to rescue people from the top of a 100-foot beam. Submit a plan, submit something. That could be a condition to the approval.
I appreciate that you said that so that it goes into the record, so when it goes to the Board of Supervisors, they have a better full understanding of what they're trying to do and what they approve. And when it comes time to do one of these exceptions, that we understand that it's not about fighting the fire, it's about getting people out of it.
Does anyone have any questions other than the equipment used to rescue? Is there any others?
I have one simple question here, possibly, and maybe it's just because I've had to argue with people in contracts laws and requirements many times. Do we have a clear definition of building height? What does that mean? Is that to the top of the roof? Is it to the top of the floor? Is it, we've seen with the upcoming item on the agenda, their building height did not include parapets and equipment on top of the building. So what is building height?
That is the definition. It's to the roof line, not the parapet.
I'm looking here, Article 11, Section 11.11-4, building height. The vertical distance from the average grade to the highest point of the roof structure.
Of the roof structure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Kenneth, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So at this time, we're going to, I don't have a list. However, maybe I do. Just a second. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, no one signs. Okay. So the list that have been presented has no names. However, the floor is now open for public comment. Again, anyone who comes up to speak, limit your speech to 3 minutes so that everyone has an opportunity. Do we have anyone who wishes to speak at this time? Sir, you've been recognized.
I'm standing up. Thank you. If it's possible, could we put up slide 6 on our presentation? Because I think I've given everybody handouts, but I think
this is for public comments.
that's correct. Yes, but slide 6, you have a hard copy, but for the people in the audience, I thought it might be good to reference, if that's a possibility.
This is for the text amendment?
For the text amendment. It's only relevant because it's about the height. Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Hobie Mitchell. I'm the managing partner at Green Energy Ventures. We are pleased that the text amendment providing the opportunity for additional data center height in the industrial zone is now being considered by this Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. The current ordinance allows for a building height of 35 feet or up to 50 feet from the allowed 35-foot standard if additional setback is required or provided. The data center industry is extremely competitive, and many jurisdictions are incentivizing data center users as they provide significant revenue versus minimal demand for public services. The current height restrictions are simply not competitive and will not attract the proper data center development in King George County. If the county is going to attract data center development, it must allow an increase of building height when an applicant presents a compelling, attractive application package. By allowing the Board of Supervisors the discretion on a case-by-case basis to increase building height for data centers in the industrial zone, you are providing the opportunity for smart strategic growth. And I won't get into this paragraph, but this illustration today shows you what your ordinance allows today. So this cross-section, this is an example that you'll see in our application. This is a cross-section of what it will look like from the right-of-way. 50-foot buffer, 50-foot setback for a 35-foot tall building. I added the parapets just for a sense of people understanding what a parapet might need in addition to the roof line. So from a site distance 100 feet away on the other side of Route 3, this is what you would see in a building. And this is with the required buffer landscaping that the ordinance has. This is if you go up to 50 feet with that additional 1-to-1 setback. So this is the site distance with the parapet, so you can clearly see with the buffer requirements, this is what you'll see on a building. So by allowing this on a case-by-case basis, like we have proposed, with increased berm heights, which we increased from our comments, and a highly proffered landscaping package, with, in this case, a 65-foot building, this is the site distance that you might see, but you get greater level of development and a marketable data center development, because this is the height you need. So here's an example. We'll go through it later in our presentation, but this, and then you'll see in the second page the buffer requirements that we're proposing. This is what the special exception process that you were just discussing lets happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Are there any others who wish to speak in the public hearings session now? All right. Seeing that there are none, the public hearing session is now closed. Do we have any further discussion from the Planning Commission? Sean, you have the floor.
I was just going to mention that this allows us by special exception to do something. It doesn't require it. So I think it's healthy that we have an option. It's not a permitted use, it's a special. So they got to come to us to get it.
Mr. DeCorder?
Well, the start date for this particular project, and I know this doesn't apply specifically to this project, is 2027 is when the revenue is to begin. And if it takes 3 years to get a truck and this is 2025, the math doesn't work. I'm reluctant to support an initiative that we haven't heard from Chief Moody. And secondarily, this seems incompatible to me to maintaining the rural character of the county. It's large structures. We're not Richmond. We don't want to be Richmond. The whole point is to not be Richmond and to keep our structures within the existing limits, I believe are consistent with the comp plan and the county community's goals.
All right. Anyone else requesting the floor at this time? Ms. Nicely, you have the floor.
So one of my questions is, anybody who comes with a project, it's my understanding, they can ask for an exemption and with or without us adding that. Is that correct? Or variance?
No. And I do want to correct one thing, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Decore was talking about this. This is not tied to their project. Mr. Mitchell chose to speak in favor of it. This is an initiative of the board, and it may benefit them if it passes, but this is an economic development tool for the county in case there are things that come through that the county believes are attractive and it needs to get beyond 50 feet. But they did it on a case-by-case basis, so you all could impose conditions that you think mitigate the damage to the rural character or the scenic view or something like that. No.
So I'm a little confused because I thought with the Birchwood Power Plant that the stack was an exception to our maximum height, but that anybody could come and ask for something like that. You're saying?
And I apologize, I am not as familiar with the old ordinance, and I don't know what the old ordinance said. That was approved under the old ordinance, and then a month or two later, that board adopted a brand new ordinance. And so what the new ordinance says is 50 feet.
Okay. So my second question is how is this compatible, or is this compatible with our zoning ordinances specifically for data centers?
It's not specifically for data centers.
No, I'm asking you if it's compatible or incompatible with our zoning for data centers that says that the maximum height shall be determined by the zoning district. Due to firefighting equipment limitations, the maximum height allowance shall not be increased. Now, does that mean we don't have a zoning district maximum height anymore?
It means you do. And so in industrial, it's 50 feet, is what the current zoning ordinance says.
But our zoning ordinance also says in section 7-6-5 data centers that the maximum height shall not be increased. So I'm wondering how this is compatible.
This is for any industry that comes into King George County. It is not just for data centers.
So my question is, does this still stand?
No, you can.
So do we amend this as well?
If the board approves this, and they have initiated this and asked you all to review it, and then it goes to them, if they approve it, it would allow any industry, any use in these categories, which I think is just industrial, right, Kenny? To ask for a special exception to exceed the 50-foot height. I'm not sure I know any other way to explain that.
Okay, I'm just wondering because one was the chart and the other is section 7-6-5.
Black letter.
That specifically deals with just data centers, that we have a limit that says we cannot increase the maximum height for data centers in industrial zones. That's the only place they're allowed. So I'm just wondering, does this also need to be amended?
Denise, can you please repeat the paragraph number for me? I'm sorry.
It's section 7-6-5 data centers in our zoning ordinance.
I think that this is sufficient, but if you feel better about amending that, then we can look at that as well.
My question then would be, do we have to have a public hearing to amend this?
Well, we're not there tonight. What we're on now is this text amendment. So if you believe we need to look at that, then we can look at that and bring that along as well.
Yeah.
I just want to know that if we pass this, you're saying we're also scratching a line through this. Is that what I'm understanding?
No, that would be a separate. That would have to be a separate modification.
A separate action, correct.
So
then it still stands. So it still stands
Does it supersede the data center ordinance or not, basically?
No, they'd have to stand alone. Yeah, Denise seems to have found a contradiction
We
here.
could pass this, if I understand it, we could recommend approval of this. The Board of Supervisors could do that for everything but data centers unless
That is amended,
language is
correct.
amended. I don't know if we want to do that.
That was my question. Are these compatible? That was kind of what I was saying. As far as I'm concerned, with the ordinance that they're asking us, it just opens the door with communication that says, hey, we're open to special exceptions. I'm not opposed to opening that door. I'm not opposed to the ordinance. I just want to know if it will apply to data centers as well.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that this would trump that section, but because this is not specific to data centers. This is any building in the industrial zone. I'll look at that further, and if I think that we need to bring something else, then I'll suggest that. But I think this would override that performance standard section.
So I feel that my fellow commissioners have asked a legitimate and made that a legitimate point. Your guidance is valued, so I want to grant you the opportunity to be as close to 100% as you possibly can be on guiding us on this. So if you agree, on our next meeting, perhaps come with the information that we need in order to make the best informed decision.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to look at this further, but again, the board did not initiate this specific to data centers only. The board initiated this as an economic development tool for King George County if they have an opportunity. Now, data centers may take advantage of it. And if we need to have another provision specific to data centers, then we can do that. But what the board has now asked is that you all just entertain this text amendment allowing for a special exception. There could be a number of other things that would, not a data center, that would want to exceed the height restriction in the ordinance. So that's the only thing I would say. I'm happy to look at it and make a determination, but I wouldn't hold this up for something that is not the basis for which that text amendment is before you tonight. Again, they may take advantage of it. It may benefit them, but they would only be one thing that may apply for a special exception. There could be a number of other buildings that apply for it that would not have that performance standard section.
So if we understand what you're saying, and you can even just take data center out, right? Just take that out. However, Ms. Flaherty has made a valid point in the contradictory of what she's.
If I could just.
Go ahead, Mr. Kendrick. Sure.
We over time have done, amendments to our ordinances to clear up these kinds of inconsistencies. If I don't have a problem with this as long as it's limited to the industrial area and that the Board of Supervisors understand what they're doing when they grant this special exception, which, unless I'm misreading it, they're the ones who are going to grant the special exception, not us. Okay, as long as they understand that it's, it's about people and property, the differences there. So, I mean, if the board approves this, then we know that our next action is to go in and make an amendment to the zoning, to the ordinance. And I would suggest that while we do it, we also clarify what building height is. Because, I consider the parapet wall part of it, not an exception. Now, if they don't want to count the rooftop equipment, I could live with that, but.
Okay.
You know, if you got to go try to get somebody off a roof, you got to get over the parapet wall.
All right, I'm gonna take 3 more comments, and we're gonna move on. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I understand it, the current language in this performance standards, any project, any data center proposal project does not meet that standard at this time until that is changed. Any project of any kind, no, I'm talking to Kelly, does not meet that standard, whether it's this data center or another data center, or any data center with buildings over 50 feet do not meet this standard. And I don't know if we can consider applications that are out of standard. Second, I think that rezoning A1 to industrial and then raising building heights for even a more obstructive visible structure is the wrong direction. It's inconsistent with maintaining the rural character. Existing industrial land, perhaps. Former industrial land, like the quarries, like the gravel quarries across the street. But to take prime A1, rezone industrial, and then increase the building height, I think flies in the face of community resistance. I mean, do we really want to go there? And secondarily, if we can't guarantee that, if we can't rescue somebody from a workplace or a repair place, you know, I would want to have the police chief tell us what, no, I'm sorry, the fire chief, Chief Moody, tell us what are the ramifications of that. So at this time, I until this is addressed, I don't.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dakota. Yes, sir, Mr. Muffet.
So fundamentally, and to Mr. Dakota's point, today's industrial district, I'm not fundamentally opposed to this. What I'm fundamentally opposed to is the Pandora's box it opens with rezoning other land to industrial, and then that'd be grandfathered in effectively. And does this open a Pandora's box from industrial to commercial, where all of a sudden you have giant hotels? I mean, 50 feet is tall. Going even to 50 feet, but certainly above it, is fundamentally not in keeping with the rural aspirations of this county, plain and simple. So I don't know that this is, again, a Pandora's box that we ultimately want to open, because once we're all gone, if people are up here who think differently, they can do a lot more damage with it than what we're talking about potentially today.
All right.
Unfortunately,
Thank you, sir.
I think that's
Thank you.
just the way.
Okay, so what we're, I don't, no actions is, or, yes, sir, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, let me quickly, as zoning administrator, my determination, if you look at the sentence that we're talking about, the maximum height, it said that maximum height shall be determined by the zoning district. So if you change industrial, then this would change too.
Very well.
They are related, but it says clearly, the maximum height shall be determined by the zoning
By the zoning district.
So then my question was, is there a maximum height? It's still 50 feet?
Right now, it's still into, unless they decide to change it, yes, ma'am. It's a special exception, yes, ma'am.
All right.
You would have to get a special exception.
Is there any action required on this tonight? There is.
Yes, sir.
Do, but they can take action.
All right.
They want them to take action.
You've heard
Again?
testimony in support and against. Yeah, go ahead, Sean. Sure. Yes, sir.
The comment that I have is that it's a special exception. So that means they can't do it, but it's something that they could ask for. So I can't think of the use where I would say, yeah, I want to go up to 100 feet for whatever, but I imagine that someday there might be a good reason to do it. Right now, we can't do that. So the data center that you're looking at, it says the maximum height allowance shall not be increased, but it's what what we change it to in that article. So we say it can be increased.
So essentially, we still have a bit of control, essentially.
It only just gives us an option. It doesn't give anybody permission to do anything.
Right. Okay.
Just, maybe there's a hospital that needs to be 60 feet.
Right.
But we couldn't approve that the way it is. But this would give us an option to approve it if it made sense.
All right.
So it doesn't mean we're giving anybody that. It just means that we could if we wanted to.
Well, I'm all for economic development, and I don't want to shut the door to opportunities. But we do know that the justification for project 2, 3, 4, and 5 are you did it once. So I think the special exceptions would still have to go through us before they went to the board. So we would be able to give our recommendation.
Correct.
I'm not opposed to it. I just, like I said, I was a little confused and going to think on it some more about whether or not I understand how that would affect one of the things that I understand is that if we pass this, if we recommend it, it still has to go to the Board of Supervisors. I think we're supposed to take action on new business for the proffers, which are asking, our next agenda item are asking for proffers for higher building requirements. And so I feel like, can we even do that before it's passed by the Board of Supervisors? And so it's a little bit confusing to me.
All right. So, it is an action.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I think you're going to get a request from the next project to pause their project until this text amendment works its way through, just in clarification point.
All right. So with that being said, we still need to take an action on this. All right. Do I have?
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I assume we're still in the discussion portion of this. My original comments were designed to draw out the comment that, building height and stuff has to do with life safety. It's not about fighting the fire. All right, and that seems to have gone into the record now, so I'm happy with that. I don't have a problem with this ordinance because it allows us to, in industrial zoned areas only, to review and approve on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the other proffers are and all kinds of things that we could bring up, which goes back to my desire not to rezone property. That may not apply to the one we talked about earlier, but it's part of my philosophy of that you shouldn't rezone property until you have a request to do so that you can get proffers and get it the way you want it for that parcel and that particular project. So I don't think any of us have problems philosophically with data centers or big warehouse complexes or, other, at least for me, light industrial type things going on in the county. It's good for the tax base. It brings a lot of stuff, but I don't think we should get hung up on which comes first, the chicken or the egg. If we send this to the board and say we recommend doing what they've suggested, then if they pass it, then we know that our next action is to go into our zoning ordinance and clean up whatever we need to clean up, be it the statement that it's a max 50 feet or a definition of what how roof height is measured, or if it's the things we want done as part of the exception process. So
Very well said.
I guess I'm suggesting that this is worth going ahead and sending to the board.
I agree with, I hear what you're saying. And with that being said, if I can, whether you in support or against, if I can get a motion from you with that being said, and
I make a
we'll go from there.
motion, we defer further action on this until we hear from the fire chief.
Motion has been made. Has not been seconded. Therefore, your motion is failed. Do I have any other motions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we forward the forward action PC-08-25 ordinance amendment to the Board of Supervisors with our recommendation for approval.
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Leduc.
Okay, yes, sir. Mr. DeCorda? No. Mr. Fox?
Aye.
Mr. Palavoda? Aye. Aye. Mr. Kendrick?
Aye.
Mr. Maffett?
Aye.
Ms. Flatley?
Aye.
Mr. Nicely?
Aye.
And Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-2.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. Next is new business. Action on resolution PC-05-25, application Z-2022-00021, Green Energy Ventures rezoning. This application was deferred from April 8th of 2025. All right. Applicant, if you may.
How about let's clarify what we're doing, okay?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Hobie Mitchell. I'm the managing partner of Green Energy Ventures. Just to clarify, we're going to do a presentation tonight to answer the questions that we heard at the public hearing, but we will defer action until this other matter catches up with it. So that you have the ability to get feedback from the board, and so you have a direction that you're able to utilize. But we've agreed to the process, but we'd like to answer some of the questions to give you some further information, and you may have some other questions as well. But
Thank you
we'll be
for that.
short and sweet if that's well. I appreciate your time. Next slide. We had multiple questions. The first question we heard at the public hearing was the sufficiency of the fire and rescue contribution of 2.1 when the cost of a ladder truck that Chief Moody has said is 2.7, and the ability to access these taller buildings. We've now modified the proffers so that it's 2.7 million at the first building permit. So you can order the fire truck right away. So zoning, and then when we get to the building permit stage, when we file the building permit, it's paid. So it gives Chief Moody the ability to get expedited purchasing. He can explain more of his process sooner, but we've agreed to that. Second comment, or second page. Expressed concern that the GEV wells that we're using for potable water initially may affect neighboring property owners' wells. So we've modified the proffers, which run with the land, that says failure of an adjacent property well. After installation of wells referenced above, in the event of failure of an established well on adjacent property can be demonstrated to have been caused by installation or operation of our applicant's well, the applicant agrees to repair or replace the well as a sole expense and expense of connecting property to public water supplied by the service authority. So we're taking on full responsibility for that. Next slide. One was expressed a concern of visual impact of Kings Highway on Route 3 and Bloomsbury Road. There was a concern about the height of the berms and type of landscaping. So we looked at it a lot, and we've now increased those berms from 12 foot to 16 foot. We're still maintaining the landscaping that was proffered to do that. If you go to the next slide. So as an example, this is your typical type C county requirement for the buffers that you might assign on the cross sections. We then increased it to a type C buffer enhanced with the additional material, but we went beyond that and we were going to buy and install bigger caliber material right up front. So at a 5-year growth, this is about what you would see in all cases. And so we've actually working with some people right now because it takes time to get this stuff. It's a lot of material. And so we're already working with some nursery growers we're looking at local species to help identify that because it takes time to get all this. You can see on the next slide, this was the example I was using as a typical, that you have the ability in a special exception process. And this is how we show that. The difference in 12-foot and 16-foot does increase it, but you can see what it does for a 65-foot building in the front and then a 90 in the back, which you never see. And you'll see that in that process. The next comment. There was questions of stormwater management, quality, and protection. And so I have here Andy Goretke with our engineer to explain the next thing and how we're mitigating that.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, members of the commission. If you go ahead and go to the next slide, and I just have some bullet points. So if you've been at the site, you've seen aerial pictures of it through parts of our presentations before. Right now, it's farm. Most of the area is farm. There's small areas along the stream that kind of bifurcate the back side of the property and the far north side of the property. That also has a required 100-foot buffer. So the first thing that we would have to do is reforest that portion of the 100 feet that's already been disturbed through the regulated, that's what I'm looking for, as far as agricultural by right use that it already is. So we'd be held to the standard that you have today. So first is reestablishing that 100-foot riparian buffer, which creates protection from the stream to our site. Then as far as DEQ regulations, there's really two things you look at: quality and quantity. So right now, you have the existing farmland. They have minimal protection. There are some requirements as far as where they can spray. But with the proposed development, we'd have to meet all DCR requirements to treat the development. So from a water quality standpoint, whether that is from holding water like a cistern, which is called rainwater harvesting, if you go through their spreadsheet, DEQ actually went through, created spreadsheets, so you can actually go through, you say, okay, I'm gonna hold this amount of water with this type of facility, and you have to go through and all the iterations until you meet their requirements. So we're held to that standard. I could certainly go through all of those different options. Each one's a little bit different. Each one has a different purpose. Each one has different credits and values. But at the end of the day, you need to hold or meet the requirement for phosphorus from the requirements per the state, as well as King George County, which also goes through and reviews the erosion control and stormwater management plans. From a quantity standpoint, and actually one thing as far as quality, that quality goes for the first inch of rain. So that first flush, that's typically where you'll have any contaminants from any type of rainfall. That's the area that gets controlled first, held, and released slowly as the whatever advice you have, whether it's filtering, hydrodynamic separator, bioretention, they'll filter through the sediment and the trash and whatever else is in there from contaminants. Quantity standpoint, it's all about holding your water over a period of time, and we're actually required to hold the water at the site, which is called pre-development conditions. And on top of that, the requirement is for your 1-year storm, which is more than your 1 inch. It's, give you an idea, it's roughly 2.5 to 3 inches of rainfall is your 1-year storm. Just to give a little bit of perspective. The requirement is to hold that water back so that it is a 20% reduction of that flow. So if you think of it holding a water jug and it's got 10 holes, that's what's going out today. We're required to plug 2 of those holes to hold that water longer. So downstream, first flush, less water, it's released over time. And then as you get to bigger storm events, there's still requirements to meet what the site is today until you get to a 100-year event, and then you still have to stay within the floodway. With that, if you had any specific questions for me, I could certainly answer those. But we can go ahead and move through the presentation.
Yeah, we'll hold them to the end.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy. Next slide. Question was about noise attenuation. And so not only do we have to conform to the code, we actually consulted an additional noise engineer who does these kind of facilities all over the world. And so we added some additional language about the testing procedures so that it can be done based on the county. We will, at the site plan stage, work on some details about how the county would like to see the process, but we added additional proffers about how the measurements would occur to meet the county ordinance standards. Next slide. The question was about lighting. King George has a dark skies ordinance, and so we have to comply with that ordinance. So all of our fixtures and photometrics will have to comply to that ordinance, and that'll all be done at the site plan stage. If there's some other considerations that have to be done, but we have to comply to the ordinance, which is a dark skies ordinance. Next slide. This came up several times about Dominion Energy, that this development is going to increase everybody's utility bills. And so we did a fair amount of research on that. And whether you live in King George County or Stafford County or Northern Virginia or Richmond, everybody pays for this infrastructure. It's in your bill. Whether it's a data centers in your county or not in your county, you pay it. It's in your bill. Now, there's certain discussions going on at the SEC about modifying that so that there was a bigger obligation on data centers, but I don't know where that's going to go. It's a very complicated process. I'm sure Senator Stewart is well aware of it. But right now, whether you have a data center in the county or you don't, you're still paying for it. And it's in your rates. And if you look at the little details, you go to the website, it explains a lot of stuff, but that is a correct, that's a correct assumption. We pay for all of our materials, substations, and upgrades to our property, but the grid, power sources is all uniformly paid by everybody. Next slide. I've kind of explained this one already, I just explained it. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the questions came up about economic development and how it's explained in the process. I think Commissioner Kendricks brought it up multiple times. So we have, when we did our economic evaluation, we first went to Davenport, which does a lot of the economic evaluations and consulting for the county. And they recommended we go to Municap, which does a lot of these evaluations all over the United States. So we contacted Municap years ago, and they did the economic evaluation, which is what you've seen before you. So I've asked Emily Metzger from Municap to explain how we came up with our numbers and the process about how that's derived. So I'm going to ask Emily to come up to the podium so she can explain it. And then if you have any questions, you can ask it.
Thank you. Good evening. A little shorter, sorry. Yeah, so my name is Emily Metzler. I'm with Municap, and we frequently work actually with Davenport, and I'll just give you a little bit of background on Municap. We are a municipal advisor. We commonly prepare economic, fiscal impact analyses and other analyses for municipalities such as yourself, and also for developers, either for bond issuances or proffers, rezoning, and the like. And in this case, we were asked to prepare an economic impact analysis and estimate of jobs, both permanent and temporary, for this proposed redevelopment. And so my understanding is that you've been provided with this economic impact analysis that we prepared, an economic or executive summary that was attached to that, and had some questions. And so I'm going to walk you through the work that we've prepared in doing that, and the assumptions and research and all of that methodology. I'll do it quickly, but I do want to make sure that I give you enough details on the research and the thoroughness that we do in preparing that, because we do believe that it's important when rezonings or bond analyses or any type of this type of work goes into a package like this. It's important that it has a lot of details and those assumptions are thoroughly reviewed so that the information is understood and that information is out in the public for them to understand as part of the package. So first, when we go through this, next slide, please, it's very important for us to understand the development assumptions, as it's the baseline assumptions that go into the analysis. And so the executive summary and the economic impact analysis before you that we provided, we received the development information from our team, and that included the 7.2 million square feet of data center development, as well as the water treatment plant, and then the start and completion dates of the development. And I did hear the commissioners mentioning that time frame. Those become the underlying assumptions that are very important to us for us to include in our analysis, because they're going to drive those economic impacts, the construction period jobs, the timing of those jobs, wages and output that flow through our entire analysis. Next slide. So then we go through all this methodology, and once we have that development density and timing, which will also impact inflationary assumptions. It's going to impact our fiscal year impacts, when those revenues and are going to come into the fiscal coffers. Also, when the job creation will start flowing into the municipality. We then need to start looking at the budget. And we will go through every single line item of the general fund budget. And we say, okay, if this is the development that's going to be created, will it impact this line item, this line item, this line item? And we will call into the county and we will ask questions of the staff. We'll try to understand what that line item is. We review the budget descriptions and we do a very thorough review of that. When we do a review of the line items in the budget, we're looking at two different approaches of methodology. One is what we refer to as a case study approach, and a second is a service factor approach. So if you reviewed the thorough economic impact analysis that we provided, it's the packet that's like this many pages. You can see that the analysis projects out the economic impact over 30 years. And there's two different approaches that we take in estimating those revenues over time. One is where we actually project the tax revenues using the actual tax methodology of the county. So for example, real estate taxes are calculated using assessed value times the tax rate and an inflation factor over time. And we're looking at a revaluation period. Earlier, it was mentioned that the county revalues property every 3 to 5 years. It's revalued on January 1, approximately every 4 years by the commissioner. And that's accurate. And so we try to emulate that process and use the same. And then we're looking at an actual assessed value and we're projecting that. We're either going to look at comparables, we're going to look at net operating income, the cost approach, which these are all things that the assessor is going to do, and value it. So we're trying to capture that exact methodology. That's what we refer to as the case study approach. Then there's the service factor approach for revenue line items in the general fund budget that maybe aren't as detailed of that methodology, or just the juice isn't worth the squeeze because they're really tiny, small line items from the general fund. We're going to calculate them, and we think that they're impacted on a per service factor. So per service population, per employee, per resident, maybe per student, per road mile, whatever is the most applicable basis in that case. And sometimes that comes out of discussions with particular departments, or maybe we just gather that information from reviewing the budget. So we're going to look at each, again, line item and is it impacted or not? And if so, can we replicate the approach for methodology? And if not, does it make sense to impact it on a service factor approach? Then if we need to impact it, we're going to make sure we have good baseline assumptions. We think it is very important to have good data and baseline assumptions. We don't want you to be arguing with what MuniCap said. We want good third-party source data from industry reputable standards. So you're going to see lots of footnotes in our studies that are coming from U.S. Census data, In-Plan software, which is an industry acceptable standard. You're going to see tons of footnotes in here from other counties, economic development factors, staff within the county that we call. We have lots of phone interviews because it's not what MuniCap said, it's what industry-wide data says. And then what we do is we pull together that data and we're going to follow that methodology. And then the comparable county source data, I'm going to come back and talk to, because the real property and personal property tax data really is the underlying source, because real property and personal property for data center is really a huge output in this case, because the data center is throwing off a lot of that. So I want to really focus on that. But these underlying assumptions, baseline assumptions, were really important for us to research and make sure that we had good solid data, which went through in our analysis of being able to prepare the methodology that went into the calculation of the economic impacts. So in doing that, we were able to calculate the results of our analysis I'll just quickly walk you through the results, and then I want to just drill down on a few of those revenue streams a little bit more in detail. In particular, as I mentioned, the real property and personal property on some of those assumptions, which I think you might have some questions or might have piqued your interest as you were reviewing our analysis. And then I'll sit down, let you get through the rest of this, because I'm sure you want to do that. And then if you have more questions at the end, I'll certainly come back up and be happy to answer them. So in the results of our analysis, we impacted temporary construction period jobs. To calculate the construction period jobs, we use in-plan data software. And the way in-plan software works is let me back up. In-plan data software, if you're not familiar with it, is census data that is compiled from census tracts, and you use codes from that census data. Very accepted data, but you can only put into it either jobs or revenues. It has to take that input, and then it gives you an output out. And so when we put into it, we put the output in for this, which is construction costs. So we get construction costs for the data centers. We input that, and it tells us the construction period jobs, which are temporary jobs over the 10-year construction period. And it tells us the construction period jobs, direct will be on-site approximately 16,000, and then indirect and induced are the temporary jobs that will occur off-site, outside of the direct site here, but occurring because of the project, and then indirect, induced, and direct output. So those are construction materials, other wages, and just economic benefits. So that will occur over the 10-year period. Those are the totals. And then on the next page, you have permanent jobs. These are the jobs as an estimate from the data center and the water treatment plant once the data centers are up and created. Now, these are estimates in that we don't exactly know the tenants that will be in the data centers. So I will say that each data center type is a little bit more unique, and we're basing this off of a standard metric for data centers, and so it could be significantly more jobs. And we tried to be conservative in our estimate so as not to be, basically put a high number out there and then it come in lower. The way that MuniCap tends to do any of our estimates, and we'll talk about this again when I talk about the real property and personal property values, is reasonably conservative. We don't want to be too conservative, and we definitely don't want to be aggressive. I'd rather come in reasonably conservative on any of our assumptions. And so for the data center jobs, you can see the direct at 1,228, that's at full build out, and then indirect induced at 1,440, and then the income, wages, and output, you can see the data center at 102 million, and then the indirect and induced at 78 million there, and the water treatment as well. We're assuming that the water treatment plant is exempt as far as real property taxes go, but it will still have economic output and create jobs, so we'll have some outlay as far as those other benefits and outputs are tied to it. On the next page, or next slide, apologies, it goes through the key revenues, and I apologize, I know these numbers are really small, so I'm going to read them off to you, but we did want to just make sure that we are able to summarize this. The numbers on the left show the revenues, key revenues over time, and right, you can just graphically see from a pie chart, the real property tax revenues are creating the most significant amount of revenues, with personal property and additional revenues, recordation and B-poll tax revenues. Real property is 428 million over that significant period there. That's including a 2% inflation factor. B-poll, business, professional, occupation, license taxes, that's the second, or well, technically third column from the left. We're showing those on a fiscal year period so that you can understand when they're coming into the fiscal coffers. Recordation tax revenues, we're assuming that each building as it's constructed, it's recorded in the land records, will pay recordation tax. Personal property taxes, additional tax revenues are really tiny. Those are really just those small line items in the general fund budget that I mentioned, on a per service per capita budget. But again, just showing that we do go through each line item in the budget and arriving at your total estimated revenues over the 30-year period that we were reviewing. So I want to just take a few minutes and talk about the real and personal property tax revenues. For real property tax revenues, there's an assessed value, and the assessor will come up with that value based on, there's three approaches to value property, and the assessor is going to follow a statutory process to value property for tax purposes. Income producing property, they're generally going to value it based on NOI. Now, unique forms of property, they can also use the cost approach to valuation. For these properties, it'll likely be cost, maybe NOI, but if they're going to sell the pads, the data center pads, they'll probably use cost for that reason. But what we're trying to do is look at how they'll value a similar data center in the county, but there's no data centers here. So we're looking at a list of other comparables as close as we can get, but we also looked at other counties. And we found in our analysis that there was a range of valuation anywhere between $1,000 per square foot all the way down to $100 a square foot. We narrowed it down to some key comparables in Chesterville, Culpeper, Mecklenburg, and we took the lowest kind of average that we felt comfortable with some properties that were as close in 2014, because again, we felt that that was more conservative at $274. I can tell you that in other districts that we work, Frederick, Maryland, Prince William County, Loudoun County, some others, it's probably closer to the $500 in assessed value. But again, this is a new market, and there's a lot more data centers up there, and we don't know the exact tenants. We don't know the build, and I don't know exactly the fit out and what that's going to be. Reasonable, conservative. So I would rather say to you, this is my economic impact analysis, and I'm not being aggressive. If it could get better, but I'm not going to overestimate and then have it come in lower. On the personal property values, we assumed $300 a square foot. And similarly, I think that's reasonably conservative. We did a study in Frederick County, Maryland. They were evaluating, and you can look it up, if last year they were evaluating whether or not they maybe wanted to impose personal property tax, because they actually don't have very many data centers, but data centers are evaluating whether or not they want to move to Maryland, because Loudoun County is somewhat getting overabsorbed, and they're about to put a bunch of power lines underneath the Potomac, and so that's going to open up the opportunity for data centers going there. So we assisted with evaluation of what a personal property tax could be there, but that started with having to understand what the real assessed value for personal property value is there. We did a considerable amount of research there, and that ranged anywhere from $400 a square foot to almost $700 a square foot, depending on the level of fit out inside a data center, because it can really range to be very simple and a bunch of shelves to very complicated, detailed, technical electronics, powered shells, things like that. So it just depends what's inside the shell and the personal property value. So again, we went with conservative, reasonably conservative at $300 a square foot. So whenever the tenant moves in, they could have something very complex, it could be higher. So those are what's driving our personal property and real property taxes, but we see those as the most significant taxes in our economic impact analysis. There will be a considerable period of temporary construction period jobs, and overall the basis for our assumptions and our methodology are detailed in all the pages of our analysis, and I'm more than happy to answer any more questions if you have them.
Okay, I'll finish up. Thank you, Emily. Next slide. We're continuing to meet. This is a schedule of what we've done before, but we're reaching out to individuals or families from comments heard at the public hearing. And one particular case on Bloomsbury Road, we've already agreed with one of the adjacent owners to move our entrance a little bit further south so that doesn't align with their entrance, so it makes it a better safety condition for them. So we're going to do that. This is on Bloomsbury Road. We're moving it 550 feet, which is not much, but it's consistent. But we have to check with Angela and VDOT to do that. But we would agree to do that, assuming that they would agree to do that. So, but that's something just listening to the neighbors, so we're going to continue doing that. Next slide. We're here to answer questions, but I just want to remind everybody, we have never asked for a comprehensive plan amendment. Never. This is in the Route 3 West Settlement area. It's been there for decades. In fact, this has had multiple, this site has had multiple potential businesses located. Not too long ago, there was a 200-acre food distribution center from Harris Teeter. And when Kroger bought them, that kind of fell by the wayside. There was also a steel manufacturing facility that was proposed there, and that didn't pan out. And so, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands this has always been planned as an industrial area, this site. We've never asked for a comp plan amendment. We don't need to. And so, but I appreciate everybody's time. If you have any questions, we're here to answer anything. And again, we deferred anything for tonight so that the text amendment discussion with the board can catch up. So you can then have some options available to you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I heard Mr. Mitchell say that he was requesting a deferral. I just want to be clear, are they requesting a deferral until the Board of Supervisors has acted on the text amendment? Till the next meeting after the board has acted on the text amendment?
As you stated, as soon as we can get back to public hearing after the board has acted on the text amendment, we're ready to go and ask that you hold on to the applications, this one, and we've got another special exception application before you. Please hold on to both of them until the board has completed its action. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize to Mr. Lemming, but I've known him a long time. I just want to make sure that answer was yes to my question.
You know you're not going to.
He can always be evasive.
Answer, Mr. Stewart. Right.
It's so hard to get a straight answer out of a lawyer.
Okay. The answer is yes, we're happy to stay with you for another period of time.
So you want to defer until the board has acted on the text amendment?
Yes.
Thank you.
Not a lawyer. All right. All right. So you've heard from the applicant and the county attorney as well. The action to defer has been voiced by the applicant. Do you have any burning questions? Mr. Nicely, you do have the floor.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a lot of questions. I've got kind of a statement and then maybe a request. Bear with me if I'm not proper with my legal language with all of this about how I go about this. I am in general in support of the data centers here in the county. I think they're a great opportunity for the county to get revenue. I think they're a great light industry. This is an area of the county that we've long intended to have as an industrial site. But I've got a number of concerns, and the biggest one is with the size of the project. And not with the final size of it, is that we're sort of being asked, being that this is the first data center in King George County, to jump in with all 3 feet and approve 7.2 million square feet in what we would consider a relatively small site. This is going to be a very compact site. I'm very worried about stormwater runoff. You're going to have a tremendous amount of impervious surface that when you get a rainstorm, every droplet of that water is going to hit that creek, unlike it is now with farmland. And I've got a little bit of experience with other property I have in North Carolina about impervious surfaces. And I think that's going to be a real problem, especially when we compact the number of buildings you're talking about in this site. I've got concerns about the noise and your ability to abate the noise. That's one of the continuing things that people worry about. I've got concerns about water usage, and that you're still kind of coming back going, we would like to use, I think the term is purple water. If the county constructs that pipe so that you don't have to do air cooling, you'd love to do liquid cooling because it's more efficient. But I'm concerned about water in the county. We've heard that. There's just a number of things. I won't go through my entire list. I would really much prefer that the county get in a situation where we come up with some sort of a phased approval process. You even talk in your presentations about this having a phase 1 at 2.5 million square feet. and then we would come back for the later phases. I guess I would prefer that so that we could see that green energy still continues to be what, in all visible purposes, you want to be a good neighbor. But I'm a little bit of a Reaganite and, trust but verify. Let's give you an opportunity to prove that you really want to be a good neighbor and that you follow through with all of these things and all of the plans and all of the berms and noise abatement and all of that. And then we can worry and can keep in our sights the full project. I don't know how we go about that from a procedural process. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an engineer. So I'll leave that to you all to figure out how we might, if you would even want to consider coming to us with an approval for phase 1 with the 2.5 million square feet. We see how that goes, and in that construction process, we start the approval for phase 2. It's just a suggestion. At this point, that's the way I would lean.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nicely. Applicant, would you like to respond at this time?
Yeah, I think we'll have to think about what you said and get back to you. I think the purpose of the phase was principally dealing with infrastructure improvements. There's a lot of off-site improvements, especially with roads and other things. And that was what drove the first phase. But we'll listen to what you said and see if we have some other ideas.
I certainly understand there's certain efficiency of scale that you have to make this financially viable. And I don't know how to do that dynamics for you, but just jumping in to a $7 million project and the amount of traffic, the amount of things that could possibly go wrong with this.
We hear you. Frankly, most of the infrastructure is going to be done in the first phase. We think, frankly, like the traffic signal. I was out there as met today, and there was a big semi-truck right in the middle of the intersection. You couldn't move. It really needs a traffic signal, and I think it's not going to take much to justify that traffic signal. It's very dangerous just because of that one vehicle just blocked everything. And it was dangerous for them to get out on the road on Route 3. So I think the transportation was, a lot of it's really up front. I would say 75% of the off-site roads is up front, if you include the traffic signal. And we got multiple phases for doing the traffic signal because we think it really needs to happen. It's a safer condition. But we listen to what you said, and we'll talk to staff and see if there's some other ideas that can be floated out there.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman? Ma'am?
Yes, sir.
So I want to thank you for the changes to the proffers. You addressed several of my concerns there, and I think you recognized things like the fire truck. That would be a pretty good burden to the county to have to make up that difference, but you've done it for them, so thank you. I think the berm height you captured, which was something that bothered me. The visibility of the project is never going to make me happy, but at least you've mitigated it some, I believe. I would second Mr. Nicely's comments. It is a very dense development, in my opinion. And if you phased it, we could understand that density better and what it's likely to do. The water runoff, I agree with Mr. Nicely again. So it's a good project for the county. And data centers are relatively clean environmentally. They're certainly a good tax source for the county. So there's a lot of positives there. But the density bothers me a lot. I wish you had a little bit more spread out development scheme. You've got about, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got about 300 acres on the site?
354 acres.
Okay. How many of them are you actually using for the development of the buildings?
Well, we're at your maximum FARs you're allowed is like a 0.6, and I believe we're at a 0.53. So we're not at the maximum that's even allowed by the ordinance. But, and it's a pretty open site. In fact, we've really spent a great deal of effort. We've already had our Corps of Engineers confirmation of wetland delineation. So we've had that, we got it in writing. Took a long time.
So
But
you're using all the developable land?
Not quite all of it, no. So Andy, you can talk.
So yeah, when you look at the site in itself and you really look at that center, that is dense. But then you also look at what we did is we're going from the roadway 200 feet to where the first building is. So that's 200 feet along that whole area. That's not going to be a building. And then on the back side, you've got the stream that runs through. On the one side, it's over 100 plus 50 feet at least on the left side. On the right side, it's double plus that. And we're not developing in the northern end. We left that alone. That's the other 18 acres there. So in one area, it is very dense because we focused there, but we also try to be protective of the surrounding area.
All that sounds appropriate. It doesn't give me a clue how you decrease the density, though, because it's a lot of square footage on not a very large parcel of land, so.
Okay.
Just a comment.
No, I fully understand. But we've really we listened to other comments about avoiding RISCOD, avoiding wetland impacts and those kind of things. And
addressed a number of things.
We even want to use cisterns for collecting rainwater, so we can use that for flushing toilets or humidification, those things. We've calculated about almost 2 million gallons of cistern storage on the project for collecting rainwater. So, but those are the kind of things we're looking at right now.
Yeah. Admittedly,
we heard your comments.
You've come a long way to meeting our concerns, and I appreciate that. But like I said, very dense site, not crazy about all the crossovers, but I am in agreement with the one traffic light that you're proposing going in.
So we thank you for, as Mr. Kendrick has said, taking into consideration what Mr. Nicely suggested, and he seconded. I think Ms. Flattery has requested the floor, and you have the floor now.
All right, so with the density, I did a rough calculation as well for the FAR, and I don't know how, when you do that calculation, you're only supposed to do buildable acres, and so I didn't know how much of it was wetland. I did take out the 18 acres for that goes to the government. So I'm wondering how accurate your calculation is if you are counting the wetlands and the non-buildable acres. But the three things that I wanted to go over was, first of all, air quality. I read a disturbing article about the Department of the DEQ that's giving waivers in Loudoun County to allow diesel engines from data centers to run to take take the power load off of the grid. And so they are giving variances to the air quality in that area to allow that to happen. And so what I would like to see in the proffers is that if that ever was a situation that came to King George, that you would proffer not to accept those waivers, and that the air quality that DEQ currently expects us to abide by would not change. So the other one is water, whether you're taking water and putting it in cisterns, or you're taking water from the ground, or you're taking it from the river. We're in a area, I forget the technical name for it, but we're in a water area that, we're losing our ability to pull water out of the ground. And so I'm concerned that you are still using an abundance of water and how that's going to affect the future. And then my other concern is still with fire. I had somebody send me some stuff that I couldn't digest at all, but it basically says that King George and the surrounding counties are in no way prepared to fight the kind of fire that could possibly happen on that land. And so I want to get to a yes on this. I feel like I need a little bit more confidence in those three areas.
All right. Are there any other I'll yield only if there are no other, I guess, objections or suggestions based off of what Mr. Nicely has said. Is there anything outside of what he has? Mr. Moffitt.
So this is a question which Senator Stewart, you might be able to answer. I know it's very early in the process because the bill wasn't signed by the governor until the 24th of March. And then the Dominion's request, the SEC, didn't go through till the 31st. But if there was a rate classification change in the way they bill high yield or high consumption organizations like data centers, would that automatically update to include those that are here, or would they be grandfathered in under existing rate terms? And you may not have an answer, but it seemed prudent to ask.
It depends. So there was a bill to have that looked at. And that means they will look at that and consider it. I'm not certain that that bill actually made it. A number of those bills were vetoed by the governor. But it would require legislation for a rate change. And Mr. Mitchell's right. Right now, under Virginia law, and the co-ops are different. Co-ops actually charge the data center developers for the infrastructure. But in Virginia with Dominion, everybody in this room pays a portion of the increased cost of upgrading the grid and putting in the infrastructure of every data center that's put in Virginia. And there are a number of us at the General Assembly level who are trying really hard to change that.
I believe the legal term is getting hosed.
I think that's putting it nicely.
Yeah, and I believe the residential burden is 55%, just for the record. So there is no answer at this time.
Not now. It's going to require legislation, and that legislation would determine if I don't see people being grandfathered, but if they've already built the infrastructure, then possibly so.
All right. Thank you, sir. I think Mr. DeCorder.
A couple of quick ones. Would this project be viable or desirable if it was in compliance with our height standards? That's maybe a question you could answer at a future date. We know the process for getting the ordinance changed now is via the Board of Supervisors. So that's really up to them. But I'd like to know if it's a viable project under those existing constraints. Thank you for your thoroughness in your responses, taking our questions. Still one outstanding question by Supervisor Binder regarding a similar project, an earlier project, which he said there are too many people in the county that just don't know about, who are surprised. And I agree that there are limits to what you can do, but I see you haven't had another community meeting, which I expected to see. We do, and I asked this several times, the county does its own economic evaluation of projects, don't they? As part of the ECD process?
If somebody requests it. I don't know, I don't believe the county has done its own analysis on this project. No. Yeah, I think the county administrator may look at that, and if it's requested, it certainly is advisable, but I'm not aware that one's been done on behalf of the county here.
I know similar counties where that is standard practice. I understand the revenue models are varied, whether you're doing storage or computing. Do we have any idea of the end use, and does that affect the revenue calculation? And there's also the computing. Cryptocurrency mining is a form of computing as well. But that would certainly affect the revenue model. What your tenants, which we don't know your tenants, and which is why there's such a wide range in revenue. Personally, I think that we need to have a BPOL, a business license rate, specifically for these kinds of projects. I don't know what they're categorized at now, but but I noticed the BPOL falls off after 10 years, and mine hasn't after 22 years of holding a business license here in the county, and I know what rate I pay. The diesel emissions are one of my principal objections regarding air quality. Why can't we get gasoline? Why can't we get liquid natural gas?
Yeah, I think Ms. Nicely addressed that one. Sean, you have the floor.
Yeah, just a procedural thing. Since we had a public hearing, are we bound to the 90 days to approve or disapprove?
We would be, except they have requested or at least agreed to defer this, all three cases, until the board has acted on the text amendment. So the question I asked was, do you agree to defer until the next meeting after the board acts on the text amendment? And Mr. Mitchell finally said yes. Couldn't get it out of Clark.
Great question. Okay. So, applicants, you've had a number of questions thrown your way. And I apologize, I didn't allow you the opportunity to respond at this time. Do you wish to respond to anything that any of the board has put your way? Now I grant you the floor.
Mr. Chairman, there was a lot of different questions, and what I think is probably best, we'll look at those, probably respond back to the staff.
Very well.
Get some feedback from them, and then they can reach out to you to ask you some clarifications if we need it. So we listened and took notes.
Very well.
And so we're going to do our best to respond to some of the things we heard today. And we want to be a good partner with the county and do our best to respond to all the questions you have and any citizens, and continue also to keep reaching out to the general public so they're well informed about our project, what it is or what it isn't. So, but I think that's the way we'd like to handle it. That's right. Since we have June to work on that, knowing that
Yes, sir.
the board won't take it up until June anyway.
Thank you so much. I think your transparency, or your efforts to be as transparent as you can, is obvious to me. Now, some others may feel differently, but I feel like you are attempting to be as transparent as you possibly can be. Communicating with the county, it can be a hard thing to do. And what I mean by that is people don't usually pay attention, and they'll see the smoke, but they don't react until they see the fire. I think the county administration has been doing their due diligence in making sure things are being communicated as well. So with that being said, I think we are ready to move on to the next action on resolution, which is, PC-06-25, is that right? Yeah. All three. Okay, so you're going to do all three, is it fair? Very well. All right. So we don't need to speak on any of
Just
this.
to do the same thing for
Very
all
well.
three items.
I agree. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. All right. Next, we're going to have staff reports, which is, I think, Ms. Ledoux.
Yes, thank you, sir. Just in your packet, we have the May 2025 Director's Report. If y'all have any questions, please give me a ring. Also, and I don't want to steal Sean's thunder, but we do have the draft recommendations on the zoning ordinance text amendment committee. They did meet 6 times and did a lot of work, and I'm going to be presenting their recommendations to the board at their meeting next week. So y'all are invited to come in case they have any other questions. And then I'm assuming that the board will take some sort of action to bring an initiating resolution back to y'all for ordinance text amendment updates. So that'll be coming. Right now, for the June Planning Commission meeting, we have a presentation from the Northern Neck leasing rezoning. And I need to talk to Mr. Over, I think, about what we're going to do with Dahlgren West, but we did talk about trying to move that forward. But now, given the text amendment height action that's going to be required by the board, I wanted to talk to them to see what they want to do. But I'm sure we'll have a full agenda anyway.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I think Mr. Clark, Mr. Lemming was waiting for you to entertain a motion to defer the three matters.
Okay. All right. So we've heard the request from the applicant to defer. So we need to take an
Yes,
action on
Mr.
that.
Chairman, and I think the motion would be, as requested by the applicant, to defer all three matters until the following meeting after the Board of Supervisors takes action on the text amendment which was presented tonight.
All right.
Okay with you?
Okay, we've heard the request from the applicant to defer. Was anyone paying attention to us to the request? Yes, yes, sir.
Motion to defer the three applications as requested by the applicant to next month.
Is that sufficient?
No.
Do I need all the numbers?
You could say I move the motion as presented by the county attorney.
I move the motion as presented by the county attorney.
Second.
All right. Motion's been made and seconded.
Who was the second? Sorry.
Mr. Nicely.
Mr. Nicely, okay. Okay. Mr. DeCorda? Mr. Fox? Mr. Kendrick?
Aye.
Mr. Maffett?
Aye.
Mr. Palavoda?
Aye.
Ms. Flatley?
Aye.
Mr. Nicely?
Aye.
And Mr. Williams?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemon. Thank you, sir. All right. Okay, Mr. Duke, were you done with your report? Okay. All right. Next is committee reports. I think we have one. Well, I think she kind of took your thunder, but we'll hear from you anyways.
We came to an elegant solution to it, made basically to remove major subdivisions from A1, A2, and A3. So if they want to do a major subdivision out there, they'll have to come to us, ask to rezone it to residential, and then they can do a major subdivision that way. So without affecting the size of the properties, the density that you could do, it doesn't hurt most of the people and the developers that want to do this, or this is their arena. So
What defines major, out of curiosity?
what's that?
What's a major?
More than 5.
Sean, thank you so much for your report. Yeah, okay. Next is the commissioner's reports, which I would be remiss if I did not express my appreciation for Mr. Parker, Mr. Chris Parker. As you have noticed, he is not here, nor was his name mentioned. Did all you get to see the letter as to, if not, I can get that forwarded to you. His dedication, his leadership that he displayed was second to none. I am very honored to have served with him. I am very ecstatic in the opportunity that he presented to me. So Chris will certainly be missed. And Mr. Duke, will we be at some point recognizing him in the future?
Yes, we can do that at the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
I'll invite him to see if
Very
he's
well.
able to come anyway.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I'll open the floor for any other comments about Mr. Parker if anyone wishes. No? Okay, so that's all I have. All right, other future business? Is there any? None? No?
Nothing that I haven't mentioned.
Okay, all right. And here comes our favorite part, which is adjournment. Can I get a motion?
A motion to adjourn to the next scheduled meeting.
Our motion's been made and seconded. I think we'll just, with a vote of a hand and an aye, meeting is adjourned.